some specific questions in the public hearing having to do with background of some, or actually all of the 35, I think, persons nominated to be on this commission. And I think all of the council has received that spreadsheet, right?
I don't know, you were having problems with your video, and I actually had no internet this morning, so I assume that if everybody else received it, I did too.
Okay, well, so thank you for that.
Did you get it, Mr. Yungmann?
But I haven't checked.
Okay, so some of us have not been on our email this morning, but we are admiring of the fact that you have that you've been following through.
I'm trying. I think Law sent me something that I still have to look at. But so thank you, Director Gavin, wherever you are, and Ms. Kendall for completing this spreadsheet that was presented, I think, as part of the original bill file, but was only partially completed in terms of identifying who the persons nominated were. And then at least in the information that Director Gavin sent to V1 directly, and maybe copied others, I didn't notice, there was also registered lobbyists in the county, because that was one of my primary concerns, is that at least one, and arguably more than one, of the persons identified among these 35 is a registered lobbyist. And I definitely think there's some redundancy built into the names on the list. I think I've made clear I am concerned about an imbalance where a number of for-profit developers are represented in person by themselves, but additionally by interest groups like MBIA, and arguably even by things like the Chamber of Commerce, who also include them among their leadership and certainly among their membership. So I was hoping maybe Director Gowan, you might remind us of how this group was impaneled, when, and what was the balance that you were trying to strike here, and why should we as a council be comfortable with these 35 names we have before us now?
Do you have the testimony? No, I didn't. Okay. Yeah, if you could, I'd like to, if you could just give me 1 minute. I want to pull up our testimony because it lists the criteria that we used to try to formulate this list. So actually, if you can just give me 1 minute, I'm going to pull it up. Okay. So the criteria that we used was geography, age, racial and ethnic diversity. So we're looking for a mix there. Expertise and knowledge of subject areas relevant to land use and planning, such as environmental expertise, transportation, housing, historic preservation, agriculture, and land and economic development. Experience with past general plan updates in the county. Community leaders in that are active in local planning issues. Obviously, representatives of our major anchor institutions like the hospital, the college, Johns Hopkins, the library, etc. And then we also solicited input from each of the council members on representatives that they would like to see on there. So that was kind of the decision-making exercise for us. What was your second part of your question again? I'm sorry.
Just whether it was predetermined in terms of what the balance would be. Did you know you wanted X number of people within 5 age ranges? If age is one of your criteria, how did you go about satisfying yourself that you had a broad array of different ages represented on this panel?
We didn't necessarily seek X amount of people for any particular subject matter or discipline. It was more just making sure that we had a mix and a balance of each. You'll see from the spreadsheet that some people fit into multiple categories. So obviously that's a benefit because we get, more bang for our buck. We get one person that can weigh in on several different topic areas. So obviously those people were, highly attractive to us. And age was just honestly tough. I mean, we sought out to have probably more of a younger representation, but that was, I'll say that that was probably one of the most difficult criteria for us to achieve. Feel free to add if you want to add anything.
I guess just generally speaking about the Planning Advisory Committee, I think something else that, even though I wasn't here when we were specifically identifying individuals, one thing to keep in mind is we were also, I think, looking at people who could be ambassadors for this process. I mean, yes, the Planning Advisory Committee members are advisors, we bounce ideas off of them, but we also need ambassadors to help promote the process and seek additional engagement. So they're really going to help us increase the public participation in this process as well.
Okay, so how are 5 for-profit developers going to increase engagement among the public? How does that serve that purpose?
Well, I think there's only 4. And I guess I would suggest that gives us 36 other members. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. But we were trying to make sure that we had, first and foremost, all the different areas that are going to be, central to the general plan update represented. We expect some people will not be ambassadors, but we're hopeful that, we can encourage some to do that.
So who on, is it 30, for some reason I thought it was 35, it's what, it's 36?
It's 30, I'm sorry, it is. It's 35 total. I think there's only 4 that represent land development.
I have Angelica Bailey, land development. I have Steve Breeden, land development. I have Tim Fagey, land development. I have Cole Schnorr, land development. And I have Jason Van Kirk, land development.
Okay. Fair enough. I think Mr. Figge was a recommendation from a council member in terms of a broader representation of Western Howard County. So, but I'll defer to elsewhere on that one.
Did all council members nominate an equal number of persons on this 35 member?
Not exactly equal, but everyone did nominate, I would say one to multiple people. Some people just gave us one name, others gave us multiple names.
Okay. I know, I presented some names after the fact when the administration met with our D1 office and presented what seemed to be a compiled list. Invitations already had been sent out. And as even to the age issue, which I agree is a close second, if not a tied first concern of mine, because is this not an exercise that defines what the next 20 or 30 years of future land use is in this county? Speaking as this old person, I do not intend to be as actively engaged 30 years from now as I am now, but I do hope that persons who are my age now will have had the opportunity to participate today. So, I gave names that I knew off the top of my head from D1. I'm sure that there are other council members who could identify younger persons within their own either field of familiarity, or they could limit it to geography. But I renew my concern that this is a very older person heavy list that will have different perspectives and probably different aims in terms of what they want to see accomplished in a 20 or 30 year land use exercise. My other concern is, though, with these industry representatives overrepresented in this commission, is this something where a consultant is going to them for approval? Like, that is my concern.
No. There will be no voting or recommendations from a majority or anything like that. This is purely just to solicit input, have a conversation, bounce ideas off of them, like Ms. Kendall suggested, to really ask them to go out to the different organizations they're affiliated with and try to get the organizations involved in the effort, be an ambassador for the project. And as we're hitting, different ideas and milestones for us to really use them as a sounding board. But there will not be voting or anything like that.
We don't have a chair. There isn't a chair for this particular committee. So
Okay, thanks. Was there an effort to ensure that we had someone represented from, or more than one person represented from each council district or each zip code, or how geographically did we ensure some diversity here?
Well, we looked at different, for us, we usually look at planning areas, because we're talking about the general plan. So really our target was to look at the 5 different planning areas to make sure that we had representatives from each. We tried to make sure we had representatives from multiple villages in Newtown. I do think we accomplished that. I think we have maybe 4 villages represented, or 3 villages in downtown. And then again, you know, the rural west is a hard one as well. So, but I think in terms of the other planning areas, I do think that we have representation from each of them, multiple people.
Is there someone on this list who lives in Ellicott City, in historic Ellicott City?
Oh, I don't know where really people live. Sorry.
Okay. Was being a resident of Howard County a criteria or a consideration?
Well, just back to we do have members who sat on the MPAT, the Ellicott City Master Plan Advisory Committee, and who have done a lot of work in Ellicott City on here. So we have a couple folks under that category. And then residency within the county. I mean, obviously anyone that's, you know, that's in the part of the villages or other community leaders are going to be residents of the county. But the people that are representing the institutions, we left that up to the institution as to who they wanted to send to be their representative.
What is Joel Gallahue's contribution? Is he a Howard County resident?
He is a resident of Howard County, yes. And I think he might, I don't want to say where he's a resident of Howard County. He now works for, I think, Carroll County. And of course, he used to be the head of school planning for Howard County Public School System.
Okay. So if I count him towards schools and Jahantab and then Mavis Ellis, would those be the 3 representatives who have specific knowledge as to public schools and that sort of issue? Am I leaving anyone out?
I think that's a fair statement.
Okay. I also thought missing from this list were some of the citizen advocates that this council is accustomed to seeing all the time, whether testifying on behalf of citizen advocacy groups or individually, given their breadth of expertise on a given subject or neighborhood. Names like Susan Garber, Lisa Markowski, I again presented some of those to the administration before this bill was pre-filed. Are there why 35? That's the number. Who was that the target, or is that just what this group became once you thought it had been assembled?
No, the target was like 25, and as we received more and more input, it incrementally expanded. But I think that when you're forming these types of groups, there's definitely that target of, optimally, you want to have somewhere between 25 and 30 members, because you want to have enough to have a discussion and not have, you want to be able to have a discussion and give everybody an opportunity to participate and be able to run a meeting. You also want to have a critical mass so that you have enough people there at any given meeting to have a discussion. But once you start getting too big, it really starts to become unwieldy. People don't all have the ability to participate because you only have a certain amount of time. And so 35 is a lot, I think. Like I said, our target was really 25 to 30. And so with the addition of the council member recommendations, we bumped it up to 35. I mean, could we add another person? I don't think that would be, I don't know that that's going to tip the scale, but I think it's pretty large where it is.
Okay. I do have some suggestions on subtractions. If you were, who is next on your list? Who is number 36 through 40? If you, for whatever reason, thought that this group would be more productive as a 40-member group instead of 35, who was next on your list? What other interests or groups could we do better by adding 2 or 3 more names?
we don't really have a person that's like waiting in the wings if we were to add. I think it really just depends on, you know, if there's this, we think it's comprehensive. I mean, I do think it's balanced. I can't say that there's any one area that we identified that we couldn't find representation for. So, I mean, I feel like those different, be it subject areas or, you know, institutions or the like ethnic racial breakdown, I think that, you know, where we tried to find representation, we were able to accomplish it. I don't know that it's lacking in any one specific area.
Okay, thanks. And then I think probably Gary is on from Office of Law, and I did ask whether there would be any kind of legal obligation or requirements imposed on this body by virtue of them being impaneled in this way, that they would have some disclosure or ongoing reporting requirement, they'd have to identify conflicts of interest, if there was any obligation like that. I see Gary just popped on. I'm sorry, Gary, I didn't read your email. I couldn't get onto the thing.
No apologies needed. This is a temporary board. The county code currently does not impose any filing or disclosure requirements on temporary boards. In fact, not even all the county's permanent boards and commission members are required to file disclosure statements. So there could be policy concerns about the appointees, but under the local laws that apply, there's nothing that requires that defines a conflict of interest simply by virtue of their vocational or professional context, or that imposes a disclosure requirement. As I read the resolutions adopting the guidelines, each member of that committee actually is supposed to have a particular point of view as a cross-section of the community matter to hopefully better inform the process. And I think, as Ms. Gowan pointed out, the guidelines don't give this body any decision-making power whatsoever. They're completely advisory in nature. So they basically provide their input when asked, and it can be taken or not, as the 6 people who have the power over the general plan, that is the 6 elected officials of the county, deem to take it or reject it.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have, Chair Young. Thank you, Dr. Gowan, Ms. Gowan.
Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Chair Walsh. I have a couple of questions, but I'll save my questions until after my colleagues have asked their questions, if they have any. Dr. Jones, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Yungmann?
I don't have any questions. I think I just want to chime in on the conversation about the group from the development community. I think you need to look at those 5 individuals not as all bringing the same things to the table. Mr. Schnorf is a commercial developer, and Mr. Breeden does residential and commercial. So out of 36 people, you only have, let's call it 1.5 people that do any commercial development in the county. You've got a few people that do residential development, and Mr. Figge was actually my appointee because, to my knowledge, he's the only person on the committee that does any development in the rural West, and he's also one of the leaders of the agricultural community out there. So he's got some very unique perspective on how rural development works and how it should fit in with the rural agriculture community. So I wouldn't throw all 5 folks that are quote unquote for-profit developers into the same bucket. That's all I had.
Ms. Rigby?
No, I'm good. I feel like there's been a lot of general plan discussion up to this point, so I am my questions have been answered.
Let me ask you, Mr. Yungmann, when was your input solicited for this list?
I have no clue. I want to say it was after, I'm using like the beginning of COVID as my new, like, was it before that or after
The
that?
end of life or the beginning of life?
Because in some ways, the
Beginning
last
of a
6
different
months have
life.
been really slow, and in some cases, they've been really fast. I feel like it was after we were sort of shut down for COVID, but it wasn't a, hey, who do you want to put on the General Plan Commission? It was, or whatever this group was called, it was specifically, who do you know that can represent the rural west as far as the development part of it and the agriculture part of it, and I felt I could kill two birds with one stone with the person I suggested, rather than suggesting two people. But I didn't take it as, hey, who do you want your council appointee on the committee to be? I thought it was more of a, who do you think would have this skill set?
And were you shown what was, I guess at that point, an almost completed list?
Nope. I saw the completed list when we got this bill. And to be honest, since we're talking about it, and it comes up on a lot of these task forces. This group is so big, and I think we have a lot of folks on here because they're just from institutions, I'm not going to object to them being on the committee, but I would hope that this group of 36 gets whittled down in some little work groups so that one group can be talking about schools and libraries and infrastructure, and the other could be talking about, specific land use type things. It seems to be a little unwieldy, and I probably would have made that comment earlier had I seen
How
how
many
big
people
the
were on
list
it?
was
Yes.
before a few weeks ago.
Oh, I just mentioned that because
Last
I
week,
think
whatever it
that perhaps Ms. Walsh and I were invited to send, actually, I don't even think, no, invited would be too strong of a word, because after the list had already been put together and apparently advice had been solicited from our three council colleagues, we were then shown the list and basically told this is the list, and it was only because we objected to who was on the list and suggested that there be more people put on the list that we were ultimately successful in having a couple of people added. So I think that shows the level of concern that was put into actually soliciting opinions from all 5 of the council members. And I also wanted to suggest still that with 5 people on this list representing the development community, that given the situation that we continue to be in with school overcrowding, which I don't think we can ever take off of our radar screen, that we should have at least 5 people from the school district to balance the people who will be making, I'm sure, recommendations to do as much development as possible in Howard County over the next 10 years. And I see we have 3 people, well, 2, and 1 person who is retired from the county and used to do school planning for the county. But I think that it would be really useful to have the person who does the number crunching now for the school district. I know Renee Kamen has actually left the state, so I'm not sure who is sitting in her place right now.
Dan Lubley is acting.
Oh, Dan Lubley is acting on her behalf too. Okay, so Dan Lubley. And I frankly don't think that there's anybody who's got her eye on this ball more than Vicky Catrunio. And I would strongly recommend that we add Vicky Catrunio to this list. I think it's really, really important that whether it's as an advisory committee, no matter what it's called, whether they're voting or non-voting, that the vision of the school district's interest, the number of students that they're trying to plan for in the future, that has got to go into this planning document. And we need strong, informed voices on this planning advisory committee to make sure that that the school district and the students of this county are being well represented.
I'd like to say something, please.
Sure, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, so when I'm looking at the list and given what you just mentioned, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I know from when it comes to boards and commissions, sometimes the chairs of these boards or commissions would represent the body, whether as an actual like representative of the body or just in theory, like, well, we discussed that a couple months ago, or we had this discussion a couple of years ago. So with respect to what you just said, the elected chair of the Board of Education is on this list. What you just said about Vicky Cutronio, I don't take anything away from that, but there's an elected chair on it. Just like how you, as chair of the council, sometimes represent the county council when, you know, none of us are maybe invited, or maybe you're there as the elected chair of the council. So I'm trying to understand what it is you said about Vicky Cutronio that the elected chair, Mavis Ellis, couldn't bring to the discussion.
Actually, I guess she won't be the elected chair when she starts sitting on this board. She won't even be on the board. So she won't be able to represent the school board.
And that's why I
because
said
that's-
as an entity, that's why I said as an entity, or just from conversations that had happened in the past. We don't know if Vicky Cutronio will be the elected chair or when this actually comes together. But my question was more of why you made that statement about one board member but not about the elected chair when you in fact represent us as a chair of the county council.
I wasn't suggesting that she couldn't represent the school board. I was suggesting that we get even more people from the school district to represent the school district, to make sure that everybody, that there's an even playing field on this planning advisory committee, that if we're gonna have 5 developers, that we should also have 5 people from the school district who can ensure that the school district's views are being represented just as strongly.
Does it take
Okay, well, my apologies then. It just sounded as if when you mentioned words like vision and knowledge and leadership, it just sounded as if the current elected chair may not have any of those things, which is why it needed to be an addition. So
Wow.
I was just
That's
asking
amazing that you've
that's all.
heard me say vision and knowledge and leadership, and that you heard me say it in a way as if Mavis Ellis didn't have any of those things, because that is totally untrue. Dr.
Well, I just asked
Jones,
a question.
I did
I
not.
just asked a question. I wasn't implying anything. I just said back what you said, and I'm looking at the list, and I'm like, there's an elected chair, just like how you're the elected chair of the council, and I just asked a question, so.
It had nothing to do with Mavis Ellis being the elected chair, and as I've just pointed out, she won't be the elected chair when she's sitting on this committee. And I do think that having as many people as possible from the school district represented to make sure that our 57,000 students' voices are being heard in the course of this development process is something that we should be seriously considering. Would you like to add anything else?
No, you answered my question, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Rigby?
I was simply trying to clarify earlier that on the list, on the legislation, it has Mavis as the representative of representing the agency of Howard County Public Schools, and then it has Mr. Siddiqui as the designee of Mr. Martirano. So that was all that I had wanted to clarify for the conversation.
Mr. Yungmann?
I think this brings up a good point, and I thought about it when looking at all these task forces. When you have people on it that are sort of there because they work for the school system, or they work for the library, or the chair of the board. I'd like DPZ to be able to, let's say that Chair Ellis is retired from the board and decides that, you know, spending the next however long dealing with the general plan isn't something she wants to do, and they want to replace her with someone else from the Board of Ed. It would be great if DPZ doesn't have to come back to us. I mean, the citizen members, maybe, we don't want them to be able to interchange those, but the folks that are on there because of their connection to one of those institutions, they should be able to sub those people out without needing to come back to us, I would think. And I think Mrs. Catronio would be fantastic, because she's also a resident of the rural West. And I added that so she could be mad at both of us.
Thank you, Mr. Yungmann.
She's gonna kill us
I
both.
appreciate that. She's probably listening right now,
She'll kill us.
and she's going to text one or the two of us and say, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
And if she does, we'll let you know. Okay. Yes, so those would be my recommendations, and for the reasons that I have just set forth.